Hey friends, thanks for checking out my channel. Today I'm excited to share with you really two things. First, we're going to take you on a plein air hike and paint adventure here in the Poconos. You could follow along with me and see how I tackle a beautiful scene along Broadhead Creek and Cherry Creek as they spill into the Delaware River in Minisink Park, which is a beautiful spot located in Delaware Water Gap. All along the way, I'm going to share with you some insights that I found while reading a treatise on painting by Leonardo da Vinci. This is an abridged copy of the original. This is not the original. However, it's very affordable. It is in the public sphere, so there are public access made available for free online, which I'll put a link to in the notes for this video. But I'm going to share some of the insights, many of which will be relevant to the effort that I put into tackling this scene today. So thanks again for checking out my channel. Please remember to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Please like this video and perhaps maybe share with a friend that you feel might find it interesting or fun to check out as well. Thanks again. I hope you enjoy. So here we are at Minisink Park, once again located in the borough of Delaware Water Gap. This park runs adjacent to the Delaware Water Gap National Recreation Area and also gives us access to both Broadhead Creek and Cherry Creek, amongst other tributaries that spill into the Delaware River. And it takes a little bit of a walk to get there, but it's an easy hike. And you know what? It's even easier than it ever has been before because they refurbished the hiking trails here. They have some nice crusher stone that's been laid down. They widened the hiking trail, at least for part of the way into the woods here. Right now, this part of the trail runs along the train tracks, which are off to the right. And it'll run right into Cherry Creek. Now, across the park here, where you see those soccer nets, directly across, you can access Broadhead Creek, which is a really nice spot, which we visited before here on the channel, and I've painted scenes there several times. This park has a lot of sentimental value in our lives, the lives of our family. A lot of sporting events here, some soccer tournaments, flag football, amongst many other events, including just some quiet days spent on family hikes together in this area. And I tend to forget how much this area has to offer. So my hope is that over the coming weeks and months, I'll come back here and paint some of the scenes that I don't have time to paint here today, including scenes like this one on the trail, where you have that nice little S-curve meandering through the woods and some of the bright colors on the brush off to the side. And that backdrop of the Pocono Mountains there, that nice little blue hue that you see about 2/3 of the way up from the view there. It's just a wonderful way to build depth into a painting, so we'll have to come back and try that at a later date. Now, while we're making our way through this video, I will weave in some insights, as mentioned, that I gained while reading a treatise on painting by Leonardo da Vinci. So we'll incorporate some of those elements as we go. Right now, I just can't help but just take in this scene, and I'm considering at this point whether or not this might be the spot where I should stop and paint. But as you'll see in a few moments, after about 10-15 minutes or so of hiking, I'm going to choose to tackle some water. I just love water effects, and they're just so they're so kind of an integral part of our lives here in the Pocono Mountains, where we have so many streams and creeks. Obviously, the Delaware River plays a significant role, as do other rivers like the Lehigh River as well. So I see these sorts of scenes regularly while I'm making my way throughout my day, as so many others who are residents here in this area and visitors do. So I'm just drawn to paint them because usually I'm marveling at them while I'm driving along the highway, or perhaps maybe catching a glimpse of them while, like I mentioned in the past, at a soccer game or something to that event. So we're going to go ahead and introduce our first thought that was gleaned by reading a treatise on painting by Leonardo da Vinci. Some of his thoughts were so technical and so practical and still provide real life application to today's painters. It just amazes me that here is somebody who lived in the 1400s and early 1500s, and he actually codified some of these thoughts, some of these processes, with the intention of helping his students and folks that he was mentoring as painters get further along than they otherwise would be. I'm so grateful that I picked up this book. Now, there's one example of the thought process that's involved in a treatise of painting that is really appropriate for plein air painters. It's a good reminder while those of us that like this sort of painting are drawn to it. And there's a couple of examples of that throughout the book. He does reference a lot of technical ideas as it relates to perspective and drawing. Also, a lot of ideas or concepts that really are intended to be applied to portrait work and figure drawing. However, he does sprinkle in some really poignant ideas that are related to landscape painting. And there's just a few that are really, really relevant to this. So, for example, one that jumps to mind is from a chapter called Advice to Painters. And there's several others. There are some areas that do seem to get a little repetitive, or he restates ideas with subtly different words. And it's probably very intentional from what I gather, and probably relates to the context with which he's applying these principles. But here's one. It's called Advice to Painters. A painter ought to study universal nature and reason within himself on all he sees, making use of the most excellent parts that compose the species of every object before him. His mind will, by his method, be like a mirror, reflecting truly every object placed before it, and become, as it were, a second nature. That is so profound, an efficient use of words indeed, and we don't know for a fact whether or not those are his precise words, because this would have been translated from his native language, which was Italian, and it may have been translated from Latin for all we know, Old Latin. In addition to that, it was something that was actually written down and aggregated by a student of his. And it was originally done so back in the 1400s, so who knows? But it is quite poetic in its form as I just read it. At least I tend to think so. Now, there's some more that are related to this. For example, there is a chapter, these are called chapters, but they're really short paragraphs, or maybe a compilation of 2 or 3 paragraphs at most. It's a really quick read, at least this abridged version is. It's 170 pages or so. And this one section, he mentions that painters are not to imitate one another. One painter ought never to imitate the manner of any other, because in that case he cannot be called a child of nature, but a grandchild. And it is best to have recourse to nature, which is replete with such abundance of objects, than to the productions of other masters who learnt everything from her. So in these 2 sections that I just referenced, obviously he's putting an emphasis on the importance of studying nature, the importance of leveraging the abundance of materials that we have around us in nature to pursue our artwork through painting. And he kind of states the obvious, but he does it in a way where it seems really, really meaningful, and I really enjoy kind of digesting that sort of prose. There's more to come, but for now, just enjoy the sounds of nature for a little bit as we make our way down this trail. For most of our time here, we're going to be the only ones on this scene, so it's going to be quiet. And in addition to that, we'll hear maybe some evidence of a dog walker talking on their cell phone later on in the video while I'm painting. I'm very grateful that that was the case. Most times I wouldn't be, but I was in this case because it made it less likely for this individual to be able to kind of sneak up on me while I'm concentrating on painting. That could be quite scary, especially when you're alone in the woods. But in this case, I heard him coming and he saw me in advance and kind of retreated down a different pathway before, he let his rather large dog kind of off the leash to go for a swim and potentially knock my painting into the water. I'm grateful that it all worked out. So there's this lead. There you go. This is the spot. This is the scene that I'm going to pursue. I'll paint here for a good 45 minutes or so. We'll get set up and we'll get started. So while I'm setting up here, I'm going to share a little bit more general thoughts as it relates to a treatise on painting by Leonardo da Vinci. The information and the concepts presented in the book run the gamut from the simple, practical, and technical to higher theory, conceptual, and ephemeral even, all of which is demonstrative of Da Vinci's legendary curiosity and appetite for experiential learning. Very much of his appetite for the scientific method actually is observed, or at least there's some hints of it within this book and how he describes the painting process. Some of the key concepts crystallized in this treatise include aerial perspective, the behavior and qualities of light and shadow, composition or design of your painting, anatomy when we talk about figure drawing and painting, color harmony, color mixing. Mind you, he was actually making his own paints, which were derived from pigments, which were in turn derived from nature, and how to see properly as a painter, how to rest properly to make sure that we don't overwork ourselves and dilute the effectiveness of our work as a painter, self-evaluation, much, much more, including simple things like evaluating your painting through the use of a mirror, which is a simple technique that a lot of painters still use today to look at their painting that they might have been working on for a while with fresh eyes. So there's a lot of stuff in this treatise that we're not going to touch upon today. I'm going to bring in some thoughts that are intentionally related to the process of landscape painting, and more specifically, plein air painting like we are today. Also, while I'm setting up my easel here, I'm thinking to myself, boy, I don't recall hearing anything or seeing any works of Leonardo da Vinci that were done in pastel. And I did a quick bit of research in advance of publishing this video and found that that's definitely because pastels, or soft pastels as we know them today, were simply not available back then. However, he did paint in chalk. He painted in red chalk, white chalk on black backgrounds, in charcoal. And I think that if he had access to soft pastels like we do today, I imagine he would be drawn to them because of the characteristics that they offer us as painters. And there are so many little tidbits within this book that are worth mentioning. We're just going to zero in on those that are related to plein air painting. Now, while I'm finishing up the process of setting up my easel, getting my drawing board set up, and adjusting things so I can paint with a reasonable amount of comfort for the time that I'm sitting here, I'm thinking as I look downstream at the scene that I'm going to try and render, some of the most important cues I'm looking for are related to values. And that is one of the things that's repeatedly emphasized throughout Da Vinci's treatise on painting. He focuses in and states it several different ways, the importance of darks and lights, shadows and lights, and the unique characteristics of light and shadow. For example, one of the things that he mentions early on in a chapter called The Manner of Drawing from Relivos and Rendering Paper Fit for It, he states, when you draw from relivos, tinge your paper of some darkish tint, and after you have made your outline, put the darkest shadows in, and last of all, the principal lights, but sparingly, especially the smaller ones, because those are lost to the eye at a very moderate distance. So therein, you see a summary of what a lot of us who paint in oils and pastels, those semi-opaque or opaque mediums, that's kind of speaking to the ordering process that we follow, where we start with the dark shadow patterns and then slowly build up to the lightest values within the painting. And that's what I'm looking for within the scene, so I know where to get started. And in addition to that, the mention of painting on a tinted paper or applying a tint, that helps us find the range of values much more easily with less work and less layering, which allows us to focus in on some of those effects that we're drawn to trying to capture with more ease and finesse. And it helps us save time as well, because if the surface that you're painting on is tinted a little bit darker than white, that will allow you to ensure that the mid-tone values in the scene that you're rendering are already covered by the tint associated or applied to the surface that you're painting on. And you can see here the paper, the sanded paper that I'm using, does kind of have a medium tone tint to it. It's a little bit of a brown or burnt umber, tinted a little bit, I would say, with rose. It almost has a purplish tint to it, which I think is going to work well for this scene. I'm starting out, as Da Vinci would suggest perhaps, with burnt willow charcoal. This is going to help me create some little guideposts for myself where I'm going to indicate where some of the darkest values exist within this painting. And I'm not worried about site sizing or getting the composition set up as a perfect rendering of the scene itself. I'm more interested in creating what I feel will be a pleasing painting. However, I also am aiming at staying true to nature here as well. So I'm going to work my way through this process, and I might zoom in here in a little bit so you can see some of these marks a little bit more clearly, in hopes that that'll help your viewing experience. But while we're working on that for you, I will share another related quote from the book. It's a chapter named "Of Studying in the Dark on First Waking in the Morning and Before Going to Sleep." So this gets into one of those ephemeral themes, kind of almost spiritual in a way, where he says, "I have experienced no small benefit when in the dark and in bed by retracing in my mind the outlines of those forms which I had previously studied, particularly such as had appeared in the most difficult to comprehend and retain. By this method they will be confirmed and treasured up in the memory." And I just thought that, this is something that speaks to the power of visualizing. Lots of times, as artists, we tend to stray away from the idea, or push ourselves away from the idea of rehearsing or practicing. We feel like that it might take the life or the soul out of our painting. But I will tell you, much like you might see in the athletic world, where you have Olympic athletes who maybe spend time visualizing their performance, you can use the same sort of techniques as an artist, as a painter. You can think about how you might set up your day and visualize the ideal day or the scene that you plan on painting and your approach toward that scene, particularly if it's a familiar one or if you have reference materials in advance of visiting one on site. And by visualizing how you're going to approach rendering a scene, you're actually going to do yourself a huge favor and definitely increase the likelihood of a really, really good painting. You're essentially going to enhance your performance through visualization. And that could be done well in advance of sitting down to paint. It could be done in the evening, during a quiet moment, just before you go to sleep, or when you first wake up in the morning. And I will tell you, I have actually applied this principle, and sometimes I forget to do it. And when I'm reminded of how powerful that is, I kind of kick myself because I feel like I should have been doing it all along. So you may be thinking, well, Tom, you just said put in all the dark values first and then build up gradually to lighter values. Why are you using such a light hue right now? This color is very light for sure. The reason why I'm doing this is because I'm realizing that I want to build in very subtle layers to indicate the background of this painting. The mountains off into the distance are grayed out. They're pretty far off into the distance. And they're pretty high mountains when it comes to at least those that are in this area of the United States in the Pocono Mountains, this Kitty Titty mountain range, the mountains that actually make up the Delaware Water Gap, they actually are rather high. And in this case, because we're on a plain, we can see pretty far off into the distance through the trees and just above the tree line. And we want to leverage that to build depth in this painting. So I want to start creating some layers which will help me diffuse some of the stronger pigments that we're going to use to build that distance through aerial perspective. So you'll see we're going to add some blues and some purples and some cooler greens as we make our way through this painting to help modify the actual color of the mountain range in the background. For now, I'm just starting with a lighter hue as I feel like layering on top of that with some of those darker colors are going to bring me some better results. I'm using a very light touch though, because I want to make sure that I can get those additional layers on. As you see, I just added in a light purple, almost a pink color has formed, and I'll continue to modify that, trying to squint my eyes to view the value and the color that might actually appear through the trees, and I'll try to match that as closely as I can. Albeit, even though we're trying to kind of paint in a representational realism, we're using abstract shapes. All painters are abstract painters to one degree or another, so I'm not going to get lost in the idea of creating a photorealistic painting. I hardly ever will do that. I am just going to try and capture the moment, the actual sensibility, the feeling, the impression of this moment is very much what I'm going for. Now, if you've stuck with this video for this length of time, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, and like this video and perhaps maybe share with a friend. Plus, one more thing. On the channel, we're actually augmenting the experience here a little bit. We're starting to offer AirBnB Experience Plein Air adventures here in the Poconos. We are working with Airbnb to actually offer plein air workshops. Any medium is welcome. If you have been a fan of the channel for a while, you know I tend to work in oils, watercolors, and pastels, but we also experiment with other water-based mediums like casein and also charcoal and several other mediums as well. But all mediums are welcome. And what I'm doing is simply offering the opportunity to leverage my knowledge of the area, some of the most beautiful scenes in the Pocono Mountain region, and also my knowledge of the access points, the terrain involved in getting to the actual painting locations, and also the little bit of plein air knowledge that I've developed over the years of actually pursuing this endeavor. So check that out. You could search for me on Airbnb, but I'll also put a link to the actual Airbnb Experience page that features my service here in the notes for you. And we'd love to have you come along with us on one of our plein air adventures. We could enjoy the beautiful, peaceful, serene surroundings of the beautiful Pocono Mountains like I am doing here today. We could do that together. And I could share a little bit of my knowledge with you, and I'm sure you might be able to share knowledge with me as well. We could advance together as painters together, painting in the beautiful Pocono Mountains. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that all skill levels are welcome too. So I have taught beginner classes for quite a while, but I can also work with more advanced and intermediate level painters. Really, the value that I would bring in those instances is my knowledge of the area and also my knowledge of not only the geography, the terrain, the trails, the parks, but also the unique weather patterns that we have here as well. Certainly for beginner painters, we can help with items that are really, really important into getting comfortable with the process of plein air painting. Things like designing your painting, materials, composition, color mixing, application of paint through brush strokes or knife work, all those sorts of things we can get into if you're a beginner, and I would certainly welcome you to come along as well. There's no better way to spend time in nature, at least from my perspective, than to take a brief hike and then paint on site. Now, if you'd like to work with me through Airbnb Experience and you'd like to stay closer to home, that's fine too. In situations where maybe there's mobility issues or you just prefer not to go deep into the wilderness with a stranger, that's totally fine too. I could come visit you if you're staying in the Poconos at an Airbnb property, or we can come to your home and we could paint in your garden or the trees in your backyard. Whatever works for you, we'll accommodate. And anyway, I appreciate you hearing me out. Just an effort to build some additional services into the painting practice that we're developing here on the channel. Hope you enjoy the rest of the video. I'm going to stay quiet for a little bit. I'll zoom in and out so you could see the scenery around the painting surface, but also the application of the soft pastel as I make my way through the rest of this painting. And I'll come back at the conclusion. Once again, appreciate you joining me here on the channel. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already. Like this video and consider sharing it with a friend that you think would enjoy this video too. Maybe one last reference to a treatise on painting by Leonardo da Vinci here in a chapter called How a Painter May Become Universal. He mentions the painter who wishes to become universal and please a variety of judges must unite in the same composition objects susceptible of great force in the shadows and great sweetness in the management of them, accounting, however, in every instance for such boldness and softenings. So I think this is a mention or a hat tip, if you will, to the need for developing your ability to judge and denote when it is that you need to be very bold with the marks that you make and very subtle, and also understand the relationship between all the elements of your painting, the lights, the darks, the shadows, the highlights. In addition to that, the movement of the marks throughout the painting. And in addition to that, what the focal point is and how you want the eye to move throughout the painting. These are all concerns that are always outlined in the very best painting books. Whether we're talking about books like Carlson's Guide to Landscape Painting, or Edgar Payne's Composition of Outdoor Painting, or others that have been published throughout time, including Color and Light, a guide for the realist painter by James Gurney. Whether it's painting books from years past or more modern painting books, most of them are really derivatives of, in some way at least, a treatise on painting by Leonardo da Vinci. Really quite an amazing compilation of thoughts here. I would encourage you to check it out. Once again, I'll put a link to the free PDF version that's available and in the actual video notes. And I'll also put a link to the abridged copy that I purchased, because it is available on Amazon at a very reasonable price. But I want to give you the opportunity to check out the free version first before you purchase it. And I'm going to go ahead and make the final few marks here. I'm going to move intentionally pretty slow in my process with my decision-making process. You'll see me kind of lean back in my chair and eventually get up even so I could step back. Once I put in some of these quick marks that are intending to kind of suggest the river stone that's here in the foreground, I'm trying to balance lights and cools and brights and darks, and trying to create kind of the suggestion of a little bit of ordered chaos that these river stones actually create here in the foreground. It's taken me a little while to get the effect that I'm looking for, but I'm confident I'll eventually get there. Anyway, I'll be quiet again for a little while longer. Appreciate you checking out my video, checking out my channel. Please check out the AirBnB Experience that's available, where you can take a beautiful plein air painting adventure here in the Poconos. Yours truly would be your guide, and it'd be my honor to take you into one of these scenes and help you paint it. And we would work together on that if you were to take me up on that offer. So once again, I'll be quiet. Thanks again. Enjoy the rest of the video. Be well. Hope to see you again sometime soon.